Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today we're going over the Italian discounts when it comes to the GE vehicles in the tech tree, starting off with the ground stuff. The ground stuff, there's a bunch of vehicles for Italy which are GE. Not a lot of them I'd say are worth it really. The first one's obviously the L6, giving you a little bit of a head start when it comes to your reserve stuff. Not really required, if I'm honest with you. Like, Italy rank 1 is not the strongest, but it has some really fun vehicles. Like the Lancia is pretty fun, S42 is quite fun as well. The mediums are not the best, but the L640 and the AB41 are quite nice starters. So I wouldn't bother with like the lower tier premium. Same with the M1340. It's the same deal in a way. It's much better just to kind of get into rank 2 at that point. The M1441, the big difference between this and the tech tree stuff is of course the 47mm and the 13mm with it as well here. I would say this isn't a very strong premium to have. Its armor is okay, but it's negated by the fact that it has this flat bit, which is only 30mm, so very easy to pen. The gun itself, also at 2.3 with the Granata Perforante mod 39 is not strong enough to deal with a lot of vehicles that you face. You know, the meta stuff around this BR is stuff like M4A3 105s, B1s. You won't be able to kill the heavy tanks, so it's just a pain to use, so I wouldn't worry about that. The Solare though has exactly the same issue with the 47mm, but it does have a little bit extra armor and also is really cool. This one was actually a user-made vehicle, so it does, you know, support a person in the community, which is quite nice. And even though it's not the best vehicle, I think it's a much better option than the other vehicle that's available. Has some pretty nice angled armor, even though it's not very thick. It can at least still, you know, bounce and ricochet some rounds. It has a 4-man crew, so if you get penned in the turret, you survive, which is quite good, as long as there's not enough or too much HE filler. And at 2.7, you have a pretty nice setup for the Italians. You know, the AB43, good scout. Same with the Stuart. The M15 as a medium tank, and then also you can bring along some of the SPGs. So I think this one, if you're looking for like a rank 2 out of these 4, it's a pretty decent pick. The better pick though is the M4 Hybrid. The M4 Hybrid is kind of the gold standard for these things, for the G, like low tier premium. Same with the Panzer IV-G. They both are fantastic. The only real difference between them is obviously the M4 Hybrid gets the 50 cal and it's rank 2, so you can't do all your dailies and specials with it, but you can run it with a 3.7 lineup, which is at rank 3, so therefore you can, you know, do numbers with it and also get your dailies done. This vehicle has access to the 75mm with the stabilizer. It's a very good gun, the M3. You know, it has the M61 shot, does a lot of damage, and the 50 cal can pretty much annihilate anything which is very low armor. It also has a 5-man crew, so if your turret gets popped, you live, which is nice. And the standard Sherman chassis, you can't really do anything wrong with the M4A1 chassis. Like, it works really well. Decent mobility, just doesn't really have a lot of good reverse. The Panzer IV-G, actually I would say is slightly worse than the M4 Hybrid, just because even though it has basically the same mobility, the one thing that it doesn't have is the stabilizer for the gun, even though the gun hits very hard for the BR of 3.7, so if you can get it, you know, on target, it's very good. But the armor is not as good as the Sherman either, because it has these flat parts here and here, and also here, so bushes are kind of necessary to make it work. It does have the bonus of being rank 3 though, so being rank 3 means that it researches rank 4 and everything below it, where being rank 2, rank 3 and below it, so it's a lot better for research, and therefore a better deal in that regard. So the M4 Hybrid is a slightly better vehicle than the Panzer IV-G, but the Panzer IV-G offers much more in terms of research, and once again, they can both be run with a really, really good lineup here. The M26DC Ariete, I know some people like this vehicle. I have had always a bad time in it. I think the gun is not good enough for the BR it's at, because a lot of the time you play against 6.770 heavies, or you get up against like 7.3 German machines, which are very strong, very mobile, and can just pen through your armor. So this has always been on the weaker end for me. I've never enjoyed using it. It's got quite a long reload for the 90mm, and it also only has access to M82 shot, which if it pens, it'll kill whatever it hits, but the penetration isn't really high enough to against a lot of the vehicles that you face. Like at these BRs, you run into a lot of T-34s, you run into a lot of Tiger 2s and IS-3s, and this thing just doesn't match up well against them. So for me, it's probably a no. If it gets down to it, it works really, really well. But, you know, most mediums are like that. And also you get artillery since it's a medium, so that's quite nice. At 6.3, the Italians do actually have a really fun lineup. You got the 2 light tanks, which work really well, and then the standard 6.3 M26. So overall, like, the lineup already is pretty good without it, and it's very much light tank focused, and that's the fun part of the Italian tech tree, all the light tanks that are available. So I would say it's probably a no for this one. The M60A1 DC Ariete, though, this one is kind of an up and down. So it's a standard M60A1. It works very well when it comes to its general attributes. It doesn't have the stabilizer, which is why it's at good old 7.7. It has a pretty rough general armor setup against stuff which has a lot of HE. You can actually bounce a lot of stuff off the turret nowadays, and then also off like the upper glacis, but the cupola is massive, and this, if somebody hits this with enough HE, it just overpressures your whole crew. It's really annoying. I wish this machine would be so much better if you could just remove this cupola, because it's just a huge weak spot. But at 7.7, Italy has a fantastic lineup. You know, you have obviously the Heat FS on the MC as well. So overall, it's a good vehicle. Like M60s and M48s, when they're fully spaded, are all really nice. Like, they work really, really well, and like your standard, like box standard MBTs alongside Centurions. So with the rewards that it has, it'll do really well. But at the same time, it does have an inherent weakness. The O40 is super fun, the R3T106 is super fun, and also at the same time you got the M47 for support, and you can not really bring along anything apart from the F-84. So you've at least got an okay cast plane to bring along with the lineup in general. The OF40 MTCA recently just got turned into a G vehicle. I'm not entirely sure if it's on offer right now, but if it is on offer, then I would highly recommend picking this one up. 8.7 is another really good lineup for the Italians with the OF40 Mark II and the Centauro 105. You can also bring this thing at 9.0 with these two, where it used to be, plus the VCC 8060, which is a fantastic vehicle as well. So this thing has everything you would ever want out of an MBT apart from thermals, which is why it's 8.7. It's just a better version of the standard OF40 Mark II because it has a beefier engine. It works really, really well in the game. It's a fantastic vehicle. Like, I highly recommend this if this one is on offer. The aviation side of Italy has a ton of GE premiums in it, and some of them are worth it, and some of them are not. Pretty much as simple as that. I really like Marcolin's CR42. I think it's super fun to play, but the problem is, with it being a GE vehicle and also being a rank 1, it's not really too worth it. The Italian aviation tech tree, at least when it comes to propeller aircraft, is one of my favorites in the game, if not my favorite. So they have a ton of really nice vehicles like these BRs. They work insanely well as general vehicles. So early tier premiums are always going to take a hit on that because I feel like they're not needed. You can just kind of grind through them and just have a really, really good time, especially in aerialistic. So stuff like the Marcolins and the HE112B1U2, I feel like are not really required. Like the B1U2 is okay. Like, it's got really good armament. It's just, it faces a lot of planes with much powerful engines compared to it, so it struggles in that regard. But if you can get the guns on target, it kills everything. The 2001 Gruppo, which is like the starter pack vehicle, so it'll probably be on sale, has also access to pretty decent armament. The only issue with this thing is its engine overheats. Everything else about it, it works very well. It's just like a lot of these Italian planes. They're great mixes of vehicles, and they work really, really well. The IR-81C is one of those which I enjoy, but it gives you something completely different compared to many of the other Italian vehicles. As I said, the Italian vehicles are generally jacks of all trades, where the IR-81C packs a hell of a punch and has a ton of ammunition, but it's very much a kind of it's not an energy fighter, but it's a boom and zoom fighter, and that doesn't always fit, especially when it comes to aerialistic, because of the fact that nowadays aerialistic fights are a lot shorter, and people turn fight a lot more than they used to. So this fits a very old meta that used to be around. It does have a lot of bombs though, so you can use it in ground, but it's not a good dogfighter. Like, this thing is, you play it very similarly to what you'd play like a P-38G, for example. so you last a long time in the battle. You pick off targets where you can, and then at the end of the day, you push through from there, right? But the IR, it doesn't fit the meta really well, but it's a really fun plane when it works right. The Spitfire, of course, is a fantastic vehicle. Spitfire Mark 5B Trop, so it doesn't have as many engine issues as the other Spitfires. The Hispanos work very well nowadays. You just have limited armament. It's one of the best turn fighters in the game, but you don't need it because these vehicles are insanely good. The B2, the HS129, its engines are way too weak. Don't bother with it. It's a waste of time. It's much better to run stuff like the JU87D3 or the SM91 and 2 if you want something for a similar role. Or you can just get the BF110 G4, which has access to a ridiculous amount of armaments. This thing is just full of guns, and also at the same time, you can bring extra guns if you feel like it. So you can also bring a pretty decent bomb drop as well if you take it in ground. It's a huge target though, so it's really easy to hit, and it does have a radar, which is kind of useless when it comes to the game. But this one is one of those that doesn't really fit the meta too well, but it is really fun to play because just having a massive amount of guns and also engines which do keep it in the air, unlike the Duck, it just fits like a general playstyle pretty well. You just can't use it as like a one-on-one air superiority thing. It'll just lose every time. The G55S is the king. This thing is insanely good. This is one of those vehicles I don't actually like playing because it's too powerful. And I know that sounds really weird, but there are vehicles in this game which I do not like touching because of this fact. If you want to, I can show you what I mean when, having a look at it, if I can find my stats on it. So here you go. 7 battles, air realistic, 37 air kills, 0 deaths, 100% win rate. When I started playing this thing to grind out some of the vehicles that I'd missed in the mid-tiers or got added, I realized how ridiculous this machine is. It is completely busted. If you want a vehicle to be able to grind through the tech tree very efficiently, the G55S is that. It has 3 MG151s, which are all very powerful. It has a ridiculous amount of ammo. It climbs, it turns, it hardly loses energy. This thing is nuts when it comes to air realistic. It also has 2 100s, so it can be kind of useful in ground, but not really. But it can be used as an air superiority fighter there. The BF109 G2 is also pretty good, but it's just a standard BF109 when it comes to the G2 series. It has the 20mm, which is nice, but why bother buying this when you can get this? The G91R4 is a very good multi-role vehicle. At 8.7, it is one of the early adopters of the AIM 9B Sidewinder, which is quite nice. So you can bring along either AA20s, or you can bring along AS20s, or you can bring along Sidewinders. So you have like a bunch of different ways that you can play it. It's very good in ground realistic because you have, of course, the AS20s. They're not as good as they used to be, but they're still very good, especially when it comes to open top vehicles or AAs, which is generally the stuff that you can hit with these things. It's a really nice addition to the ground lineup at 8.7 and 9.0 that the Italians have, and the standard tech tree version of it is not as good as the premium version. So you should definitely focus on getting the premium version if you want a really nice vehicle. So this is good in every game mode. Obviously, in air realistic, it's a little bit heavier than some of its competition, so therefore you have to use the missiles to slow stuff down, and then you can beat them in turn fights generally, or beat them in energy fights, depending on what you face. But this is a really good vehicle for that. It also has really high rewards on it, so can grind out a lot of the tech tree just by itself. Has a really low repair cost as well, so you can literally hit a target, nosedive, and still make SL in it. The Ariete is one of those vehicles which is very fun to play, but unfortunately the meta that is around it right now is a pain. And just to show you, so the Sagittario, which is like the slightly worse version of the Ariete, I went 20-4 in it on 12 games without even really thinking about it, and didn't want to play it again because of the fact that it was once again too good. It has been up BR'd recently though, after I played it, so maybe it's a little bit worse now. The Ariete has some of the best 30mm in the game, really high velocity on the guns, which is really good for it, and it also has insanely good energy retention in turns. If anything engages this thing in a turn fight, it loses. The question is, can you force people people into turn fights, and can you force people into one-on-one engagements when there's so many missiles and so many other things running around at the BR. So it's one of the best gunfighters in the game, but it's at a BR which faces a lot of missile fighters. There are no helicopters which are on sale for G for the Italians, so instead we're going to have a look at the blue water and coastal fleet stuff for Naval. Now, when it comes to Italian blue water, it is pretty weak. There's not a ton of really good vehicles in here. There's a few like of the early cruisers which are quite fun to play, but generally the destroyers are pretty rough. So the Aquilone I don't think is really required. Because nowadays you actually have 2 3-3s that you can run. They're not good, but at least it's something. The Genier, which is the Fante class, also isn't very good either. It's a little bit better than the opposition because it actually has the American turrets, the 127, so they have a very good fire rate on them. And also it has 3 dual 76s on it, so a decent second setup. It's just not great at anti-air stuff, but this is probably a better vehicle to pick up if you want to grind through the tech tree quickly to get to those cruisers, because it has really good SL rewards and also RP for it as well. The Tigre is unfortunately a Leon class, and after playing the Leon, I cannot recommend this thing at all. Its guns, I suppose, are all right, but they have a really long reload, and you only get 4 sets of them in dual mounts, and because of the reload and because of the fact that this thing is really hard to get all the guns on target at once because of the positioning of this one and also the back one with the tower in the way, it's so annoying just to try and get it to shoot. It's also a very large destroyer, but doesn't actually have a lot of like nice parts to it. Like the actual torpedoes are pretty bad. Like you get 4 of them and it's only 12k and they're pretty slow. The extra guns that you get on this thing, 2 single 40s and 2 single 76s, is not enough to be able to stop anything from the air. So you're very reliant on your first stage cannon stuff, and they're just not good against the opposition. It's a really, really bad premium. The Polar is the other one, and this is just a copy of the Zara. They're both Zara class actual cruisers. So if you want to get to the highest echelon, this is probably the best thing to use. It's still one of the weaker premiums at 5.7 compared to other nations, if you have a look at the Prince Eugen and things like that. But it does have 4 dual mounts of 2 or 3 millimeters, which at least that's that there. The armor is not good enough to really stop anything, and the secondaries it has 6 dual 100s, which is pretty good for secondaries. They're in okay positions, but the problem is, you know, they only have like 3 sets per side. You got 4 dual 37s and 4 dual 13.2s. Not great, once again, comparing them to the opposition that exists when it comes to the game. So it's just a weak vehicle, but it is your best shot to be able to grind through all the things, I suppose. But I would much prefer just to kind of play this BR here with the Etna, the Attilio Regolo, and then also the Bartolomeo Colleoni. This is pretty much your like meta BR. The Trento is quite nice as well. It has pretty much the same armament as the Polar, but just at a lower BR, so you can just do that. For the coastal fleet stuff, you got the Maz, don't bother with it. It's not a very good vehicle, and you basically just have a copy of it in the tech tree, which acts very similarly. It's not good, even as a starter vehicle. Not worth even the small amount of G it has. The 1.7 lineup is okay for Italy, and the 2.3 is where it really shines, because this thing has a quad 20 on it, which makes it quite fun to do. The Sparviero is okay. In general, it's probably your best bet when it comes to the coastal stuff. The 76mm is really nice against smaller machines, completely useless against destroyers. So it really depends on the matchup that you get, whether it's going to be useful or not. There's also a lot of things nowadays which have very rapid fire guns, even stuff like the Freccia with the 40mm, and also many others with like 30s and 20s that will tear you apart. They did at least fix the maneuvering on this thing. The maneuvering was really bad on it, but it's much better now, and it can outrange a lot of vehicles in the coastal setup. The only thing is a lot of the maps don't really fit that very well, so it doesn't work too great. It does also have HEVT, so you can take out planes pretty easily, and does get artillery as well, so there's at least that. But it's, once again, it's a very rough pick. The coastal and also blue water premiums for Italy aren't very good. But that's Italy overall for its GE premiums. As always, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time.
I'd like to thank Forge, Siegebreak, Carrion Crow, Nicholas Richardson, Elove Goat, Pyman, Winter Scientist, Merciless Reaper, Orange Tail, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, Moxie, B. Young, and also Sem Arslan, Wilkski, Uncle Bean, Derek R., Bareen, Lafouche, and Samuel Slick for supporting the channel.